All right, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Noise, Signals, Stories, and Spicy Takes, the show where we dig into the stories of the people shaping the future of app-based computing with a special focus on mobile. I'm your host, Matt Klein, co-founder and CTO of Bitdrift and the creator of Envoy. Each episode will talk with engineers, founders, and technical leaders who've transformed the way their companies build and understand what's happening inside their systems. We'll dig into the challenges, the breakthroughs, the lessons learned, and wrap it all up with their hottest takes. Let's dive in. Today, I'm thrilled to have Michal Palczewski, who is a senior staff engineer at Instacart, where he works on the Android software for Caper smart carts. He's been building mobile apps since the launch of the first Android phone, with previous roles at Google on projects including Google Play, Hands-Free, and Android Auto. Welcome, Michal. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, glad to be here.
Great. Well, you've had a really interesting career. So I think how I like to start these episodes is I'd love just to learn a little bit about your background and your path in terms of how you got into mobile development. So feel free to take it away and we can go from there.
Sure, yeah. So it was so my first job programming was in the year 2000. So I've been doing this a while. So I remember the year 2000 bug, but it was for academic type software at a lab doing genetics. And so the guy wrote an email and he said, "Hey, is anybody interested in this job?" I was like, "Oh, I guess I'm interested. This sounds interesting. I've been studying programming." And when I got to the interview, he said, "So most people sent their resume, but I just got this, hey, I'm interested." But I think I was always very passionate about this kind of stuff. And I interviewed well. I got the job. And I was doing academic programming for a long time. Eventually, I went to grad school at Florida State University. And around that time, I had a Motorola Razr. And and then I upgraded it to one of
I,
those.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think most people on this call probably don't recall what came before smartphones. Like
Fair enough. Yeah.
they probably never saw a BlackBerry or never saw a flip phone or any of those things. So you and I are probably dating ourselves here. But
I am
anyway, go
definitely
ahead.
dating myself. Yeah. So yeah, I had so the Razor phone was like this. It was the pinnacle of dumb phones.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very sleek, and I got a Sidekick. So the Sidekick had a hardware keyboard. The screen flipped up
I
upside
remember
down
that
all
one
in a cool
too.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was my first foray into smartphones. And I would just be messaging people all the time. But what really frustrated me with it was they had a SDK. So you could program for it, but you couldn't just download the SDK. You had to apply to get the SDK. And in order to apply to get the SDK, you had to have an idea. Yeah, this is the kind of app I want to build. And if they deemed that it was good enough, they would send you the SDK.
Sorry, and this is the SDK for the Motorola Razr flip phone,
Oh, this is
basically.
for
Is that?
the Sidekick.
Oh, the Sidekick.
The
Okay, got it. Yep.
Sidekick,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
the
Yeah. Okay.
Danger.
Go
So
ahead.
funny enough, the people that made Danger was the OS on Sidekick, and they're the same people that ended up making the Android. So it was the same team. But yeah, you couldn't just get the SDK. I didn't bother applying for it. I just wanted to tinker. And but when I saw that Android was coming out, it was by Google. There was a lot of it was open sourced. The SDK and the docs were just on there. You could start programming for it. I immediately jumped on it. And in some ways, it wasn't as good. The battery life was worse, but it had a real web browser in it. And what really frustrated me, and this is what gets me into my first app, is at my school, we had a Wi-Fi network that was a captive network, and you had to log in with your school credentials. And those were like a long password with symbols and numbers and capital
Yep.
letters, and you had to type that in literally every time you'd pull your phone out of your pocket if you didn't want to use your limited mobile data, which is all you had at the time. And it wasn't very fast. It was 2G. So quite uh,
Quite slow. Yeah.
quite slow, especially indoors. And so I wrote an app that basically would save your password. I saved it to shared preferences, very secure or lack thereove.
Probably shouldn't tell people that you were doing things like that. But yeah.
Probably shouldn't. If you still have the app, go ahead and
Yeah.
uninstall it. I'm sure they've
Yeah.
come up with better ways of logging in now.
Right.
Um, but it would just log you onto the network. And so you didn't have to so it was very convenient. You just open it up, you'd be on the network.
And sorry, just so I'm keeping track, this is when you were working a separate job in academia. You just decided to pick this up on the side, basically.
I was a grad student at the time.
Yep.
Yeah,
Right.
so I
Okay.
was basically a
Yep.
TA. Yeah, so I just did this on the side and I put it in the App Store. Sold it for 99 cents because that's how right now it'd be a subscription for 99 cents a month.
Right.
But
Right.
but that's how you did it back then. Made like $500, which, is not nothing. A little help as a grad student.
Yeah, of course.
And so what happened next is I got an email from a software company. They were literally 5 minutes from my house, and I was at home that day. And they had a career fair, and they said, "Come here, and you'll get free lunch." Which, as a grad student, that sounds great. Free lunch, and so I went. And they asked me if I knew anything about mobile app development. And I said, "Well, I got this kind of little app that I put in the App Store." And it was immediate. Hey, you have to come talk to the vice president of engineering. They got me to come in for an interview, and I got an internship like pretty quickly, a paid internship. So that also helped because I was a grad student. I had a stipend, but having a paid internship on the side was wonderful.
Yeah, and sorry, were you a computer science grad student or were you studying something separate?
I was studying scientific computing,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
which
Yeah.
is like using computers to do science, a lot of
Right.
numerical
Of course.
algorithm
Yeah.
type stuff.
Yeah.
It was in genetics, so there's a pretty successful genetics paper that I have a lot of citations for.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
And then immediately, first day on the job, they're like, "Okay, so we need you to go to iTunes U and learn iOS." So I did. And so I was doing iOS there, and then they wanted me to do Android again.
But
Yeah.
hold on. This is what year? Because I don't remember. iPhone came out and Android came out in what year? Like 2006-ish or something like that?
Yeah, 2006-ish, but I think I started
Okay.
there at 2000. Well, I think Android was a year later, like a 2007 or
7. Okay, so
yeah.
this is fast forwarding. You had been in grad school for a while at
I
this
had
point.
been, so this is like
Yeah.
2010-ish.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Fun fact, I actually started my career working on Windows Mobile, which was the
Oh,
precursor
okay.
to
Yeah.
Windows Phone, and then obviously it was pre-iPhone and all of those things. So most of my later career has been in back-end systems and stuff like that. But I actually started my career doing this stuff too. So I definitely remember this time. It was
Awesome.
a very, very exciting time. Anyway, keep going.
Well, I was at Microsoft in 2003. I was working at their call center for developer support.
We must have overlapped because I actually worked at Microsoft 2003 to 2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. We definitely overlapped. And I remember they had Windows Phone back in 2003 or whatever it was called exactly back then. But they were like, "This one is it. This is the one."
I mean, what's frustrating in hindsight, and we're getting a bit off topic, is that Windows Phone pre-iPhone had all of the pieces. They could have been iPhone.
Yes.
But Microsoft was so hyper focused on the enterprise market and all of those things that they didn't see that the consumer market, that obviously Apple and Google captured would be so big.
Yeah.
I
I
think
mean,
it's
it
probably
really,
one of the biggest gaps that they've ever had. Anyway, yeah,
yeah, I mean, it took Apple to show everybody because
yeah,
even then everybody was chasing BlackBerry.
yeah,
And yeah.
yeah. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. So we're in 2010-ish, and you're now doing iOS and Android development.
Yeah, and so as an intern, we launched this was my favorite app that we launched as I was an intern. We launched a ticketing system for police officers to use in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
Yeah, so it worked with like a Bluetooth printer. There was some web views, so we didn't have to do too much, but we had to write this app. It deployed to Puerto Rico, and my big thing was I had to write I had to make this Bluetooth printer work The SDK was not good enough to get the tickets to look like we wanted them to look like, and I decompiled their SDK just to figure out how to work it.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And
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 and I say, did you work on the back end software for that as well, or
I did
were
not work
you?
on the back
Yeah,
end back then.
got
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, we were like printing these tickets, sending it to QA, coming back, fixing it, sending it to QA. We were like making paper airplanes out of those tickets, throwing them at each other.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, it was on the front page of a Puerto Rican newspaper. The governor was holding one of my tickets. I was like, "Oh my God, that's the ticket." That's it was like my first like really exciting moment, and like, oh wow, I did a thing. It made a difference.
It is a pretty good feeling when you see your software out there and you see it being used. I mean, I'm sure it's a different feeling when you know that you've been giving people parking tickets, but it's a fantastic feeling seeing things used.
Yeah, absolutely. So eventually I graduate from grad school. I get my gear together, defend my dissertation, and I have like about a week where I'm not going to grad school and I'm working my, I had gotten my internship upgraded to a job. So I'm going to work. And then a week later, Google calls me and they're like, "Hey, do you want to come work for Google?" And this is in 2013.
How did they find you? Like,
I,
how did they know about it, or what?
well,
Yeah,
they found me on LinkedIn. And at that time, I decided, Facebook was really big back then. And instead of, I said I was going to spend more time on LinkedIn getting my profile up to snuff than I will on Facebook. So I just made sure I stood out. I don't know if I was even thinking about standing out. I was like, I'm going to get it as good as I can get it. And I don't know, maybe they just keep track of like who graduated recently or
sure,
how they
yeah,
did it. But
yeah.
one of their recruiters just reached out to me, and I I got the initial phone screen, and I did not do very well. I'm surprised they called me back for a second phone screen. To this day, I'm surprised. But I must have done well enough that they were like, let's try it again. But taking that phone screen, I was like, okay, this is what these interviews are like. Okay, I can prepare. And so then the second phone screen I did much better on. And then they called me on site. And I read a book called Programming Pearls, very
Yeah,
classic
sure.
in the field. I recommend that to anybody who's taking like these lead code type interviews. I think it gets your mind thinking in the right directions.
Yep.
And so by the time I was on site, I killed it and got hired on at Google. And that's what really then my career really started. Also, it helps to have a coding job. If you're coding all the time and then you have a coding interview, then
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
it's definitely
Although, I mean, a lot of these interviews, especially those kinds of interviews, I feel like it's still somewhat of a crapshoot in terms of how it goes. Fun fact, I have actually, over my career, I've interviewed at Google and I was rejected twice.
okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just so it goes. But anyway, so you wound up at Google, and were you working on Android at Google?
When I started at Google, I was working on iOS.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had this I was working on a product that when I joined I was in the payments org and it was about getting so you could buy things using your stored Google credentials, but only non-digital goods because digital goods you have to use Apple's in-app payments. So was not a very successful product. Not a lot of people are using Apple devices, want to go into an app, log in with Google, use their
Right. Yeah.
stored payment. Yeah. I was working on that for a few months, and at that time, Google was constantly reorganizing. So I got reorged, and I got reorged on this team that looked at payment declines. And we were trying to reduce payment declines. I really, still to this day, don't know what I did on that team other than some SQL queries. To give you a perspective, every year I was at Google, I wrote 100,000 lines of code. They have a way to track that.
Wow. Okay.
And those 2 months, I wrote 200 lines of code. total.
So I mean, were you like just looking at analytics or like what were you doing during that time?
Yeah, yeah. I think I was looking at analytics and trying to discern why payments were declining and what we could do to prevent payments from declining.
And it was payments were declining. I guess I'm trying to understand because this is obviously a
Yeah.
topic that I'm very passionate about. Was this stuff that was happening on the client that was hard to understand, or was it the interaction between like the client and the payment processor? You know, it's just like a lot of these flows are very difficult to understand. So, what was involved in trying to figure all this out?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. It was not on the client. It was definitely in the back end. I think Google is its own payment processor. Well,
I see.
they're they still work with banks, right? But they're basically have their own Stripe, and I was in
Right.
that. Yeah, and so it's like, okay, is their card expired? Is that why it declined? Is it a fraudulent card? Can we ask them for another card? It was trying to get data to help drive product decisions,
Sure.
and I don't know if I did anything like it worthwhile. I was like looking at the time, and I was like, is it time for me to go home yet? So it's probably like one of the least satisfying times in this industry I've ever had. But they needed me to come back to finish that original project so that they could launch it on time and be done with it. And so I came back and they had a new manager. I worked with him. He ended up being my manager for a very long time because I was like, can I
Okay.
stay, please? And he said, oh, yeah, I'd love to have you on my team. I had to talk to the director. And so that's what got me started on the hands-free project. And this was a Larry Page idea. And it was basically, we want payments to work where you keep your phone in your pocket. You just say, I want to pay with Google, and then you're done. And it took us a couple of years to get this to work right. And we worked with McDonald's, and you could eventually just walk into a McDonald's and say, I want to pay with Google.
Is this different from because I use Google Pay all the time. You know, I
Yeah,
go into the store and I take my phone out and I tap it
tap
on
it.
the
Yeah.
console. Is that or is this something else that we're talking
No,
about?
this is something else. This was a little bit more advanced. So we used Bluetooth Low Energy, facial recognition. Uh,
Oh, I see. Interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the Low Energy told the BLE told you that the person was in the vicinity of the payment terminal, and then the facial recognition allowed you to say who was actually at the
Well, that's
front of the line.
fascinating. So, was your software is this terminal side only, or would it also interact with your phone that has your identity? So, is there like an SDK on
Yes,
both sides?
yes. So there was terminal side. There was a separate box in the store and an app installed on your phone. So you need to have the app installed.
Okay.
And this was both Android and iOS. And I was leading both the mobile teams and eventually the whole team.
Super interesting. Yeah. And is that technology is it still widely deployed? I actually don't know much about how this area works, mostly because just as a consumer, as I said, I use the tap to pay all the time.
Right.
But I don't know that I've ever, at least to my knowledge, that I've done the facial recognition payments
No,
option.
it's eventually we decided to roll it into Android Pay. And then Google got sued for using facial
Oh,
recognition in a public space. And it kind of, so they didn't
went
want to
away.
launch this. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it
So,
sounds like a fascinating project, though. So,
yeah.
so you got as far as to get production prototypes, as you said, with McDonald's or some other store.
Yeah, it
Um,
launched at 40 McDonald's in the Bay Area.
oh wow,
Yeah,
okay.
so yeah, so we were actually like using it to pay and yeah, getting it to work reliably was the
Uh,
trickiest part.
That was actually going to be my next question. I mean, I'd love just because I'm interested in these kinds of
Yeah.
things. It's like what was the hardest thing that you had to debug when you were trying to launch this thing? I mean, it sounds like there's so many moving parts between the facial recognition, the terminal part, the phone part. I mean, it just sounds like there's so many pieces that can go wrong here.
Yeah, so the phone needed to be in a particular geolocation and then it would listen for beacons and then it would check in, and but then we wanted it to work offline. The most challenging thing was that it could fail in
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
so many different ways. And what I focused on was I took a look at every single bug report that came in. There was a lot. And so
Sure.
sometimes I'd be skimming over them, right? But I wanted something actionable to come out of every single bug report. And so sometimes the most actionable thing was to add more logging.
Yep.
And
Sure.
so I built the framework at the time. I think right now you get these kind of for free, but we wanted to make sure that every bug report had all of our logs attached to it.
Yep.
And so we made sure that that was sent up with that. Like literally our logcat logs were piped into this thing that so that it was part of the bug report. And and then it was like, yeah, okay, here's a bug. Do I need more logging? Do I need more? Uh, Probably. Okay, what can I log? Where did it fail? So I was very methodical about this, but it was kind of like, how do you eat an elephant? One teaspoon at a time, and that's how it was. And so you didn't see any huge jumps in reliability, but then you zoomed out and looked over like a 6 month period, and it was just like
Absolutely.
steady, yeah,
Well,
steady
it's
increase.
also, I mean, as you obviously know, mobile is so difficult compared to server because every time you got to add a log, you have to update the firmware on the devices that are running in the store with the facial recognition software. You got to get the app update out and all of those things. So it's so painful, versus what you can do on server.
Yeah, it wasn't as bad on the firmware that was running on the in the store because that was our hardware. So it was okay, we'll just push
Right.
a
Yep.
new firmware to
Sure.
that. But on the phones, you have to convince users to update your
Absolutely.
app.
Update.
Yeah.
Yep. For sure. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the trickiest part is
Yeah.
if they're not updating, then you're getting like, okay, well, this is an old version. We fixed this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so you worked on the hands-free stuff, and
Yeah.
then what happened after that?
So after the project, our team just became the Google Pay growth team. And so we worked on various Google Pay growth initiatives. And that was especially tricky because back then GMS Core or Google Play Services was launching maybe once every 6 months. And
Right.
a big part of Android Pay was on Google Play Services. And so you had to get it right. And if you wanted like a cherry pick late in the dev cycle, then it was going up to a vice president and he was going to be grumpy about it. Like it just, so you had better get your ducks in a row and get things ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to imagine these days of developing any software that's on a 6-month release cycle, but I do remember back earlier in my career that was not uncommon for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And they wanted it to make it more frequent, but they stuff just kept slipping and
Yeah,
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
But Android Pay did launch I think it launched every 2 weeks. You had to get a bunch of approvals every time you wanted to launch it, which worked. When I was on the hands-free team, that was tough. We didn't have a lot of people on that team, and then you had to go through the same approval process every time you wanted to launch a new version as the Google Pay team, which was like much bigger, and
Yep.
they could have a TPM drive the whole thing.
Yeah,
Whereas,
of course.
yeah. And then eventually I was like, I don't want to work in payments anymore. Like I've been here 4.5 years, and I was like, okay. Oh, one of my colleagues that was on my team, he went to work for Android Pay, or I mean, sorry, Android Auto. So he recommended Android Auto, and that was a fun team to be on. They uh they had all these cars, and so you could like one day you drive home with a Jeep Cherokee, another day you drive home with an
Mhm.
Alfa Romeo, and you'd be testing out the
All for testing purposes, of
all for
course.
test.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So which part of Android Auto were you working on?
The head unit. So this was Android Auto embedded, which is different than what most people think of Android Auto is where it runs on your phone and projects to
Yep,
the
sure. Right.
unit. But a lot of head units themselves are running Android, and so that's the That's the version of Android that I worked on.
Yep.
I did not write a lot of code during that time, as much as I tried. I think they wanted me more because I was a staff engineer by that time, and they wanted me more to like review their docs, make sure that the design is fine, and drive projects and think of edge cases and I'm I'm more of an execution kind of.
Yeah, it seems
I
like
like to be in the
you like
weed.
to get your hands dirty a bit
Yeah, I
more.
love to
Yeah.
get my hands dirty. And by that time, a few people I had known went to Instacart.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I remember I kind of interviewed there and started working there. And that was quite the change of pace because that was back in 2019.
For sure. Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, and that was, well, sorry. So that was right before the pandemic started then, right?
A year
Um,
before the
a
pandemic.
year
Yeah.
before. Yeah. But obviously still a fairly early startup at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so yeah, I mean, I guess tell me more just because you've obviously in your career, you went from being an academic, obviously, to working at Google,
Yeah.
and then going to Google and working at a faster paced startup. That's obviously those are very big transitions. So yeah, I
Yes.
would love to learn a little more what it was like to go between those.
Yeah, so it was very much, I just loved how much less process there is in an early stage startup. So we'd be constantly sending each other like the ship a Slack icon. It's
Yep. Right.
like ship it, ship it. And so like at Google, when you wanted to launch a new version of the app, there was a whole review process. Everybody had to okay it and like a whole stack of people, legal, vice presidents, whatnot. I don't even remember like everybody that had to okay it. You go to Instacart, and then a TPM actually you submit a PR or I guess a CL at Google, and it goes to a TPM, and he makes sure that everything is done, and there's your binary, and then
Right.
he actually puts it up in the App Store or puts it up at the
Okay.
Google Play Store. Whereas like you get to Instacart, and it was like, okay, so you're now on call, so you have to upload it to Apple. And I was like, okay, cool, yeah. And there was no approval. It gets released every week. It gets cut every week, gets released every week.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the cadence was much quicker. The first thing I noticed was how easy it was to find a meeting room. If you ever needed a meeting room, they were all empty. And whereas at Google, like they were always full. So there was so much less meetings.
Fantastic. So what were you working on there when you started?
So I've been on so many different teams there.
Yeah.
I joke that I haven't been on one team for more than a year, except now I've been on Caper for 2. So at first I was on the platform team, but when I'm working on platform, I also like to write features. I feel like if you're just working on platform, it it's kind of hard to understand like what the developers are going through.
I could not agree more. You know, I think so many platform teams, whether they're client platform teams or server platform teams, if you're too divorced from the people that are using the tools, it's like, what are you actually doing? You know, I mean, it's like you're not building tools that the application developers actually want to use or making their lives easier.
Yeah, I think you end up making your own life easier, but you're not.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
So shortly after that, we decided our conversions were not great. So they took a bunch of people, put them on a conversion team. Let's get more people signing up. And and so I became part of the growth team again. I was like, oh, okay, I'm on a growth. This is familiar. I was on growth free and Google Pay. Now I'm on growth at Instacart.
And sorry, that was getting people to sign up, or they had signed up and you're trying to figure out why they're dropping off or why they're not using the app or something along those lines.
So it was after they've installed the app, get them to make their first order. So
Right.
kind of,
Yep.
so that whole funnel, and it was like add an item to the cart, go through checkout.
Right.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
mean, I guess from those kinds of things, tell me more about like what are the mechanics of, I don't know, because I'm guessing you have to look at a bunch of analytics, you have to look at, I don't know, how long it takes to launch the app and whether they drop off on different screens or something along those lines. So, it's like what are the mechanics that you're doing to actually figure all of that stuff out?
In a lot of my grow teams, I did not look at a lot of analytics.
Interesting. All right.
And there's kind of two reasons for that. At Google, we had project managers. and they were looking at analytics, and we had like a really great one that worked on Google Pay, and he could look at analytics better than I could. So there was kind of like, let me just see what he has to say.
Right.
And on Instacart, I also didn't look at him directly. We had a funnel, and we kind of knew that kind of from the app installed to getting the first order is what we wanted to do. And it was always more about experimentation rather than an
Got it.
iteration,
Yeah.
rather than like like sure you have your broad stroke analytics, but like your detailed ones we weren't about. And so conversions are generally about, I found that they're generally about two things: reducing friction. So basically making it as easy as possible for you to make your first order. So like don't require an account if you don't need an account to get started browsing the app.
Yep.
That reduces friction. So you can have a little bit more friction later in the process, but you definitely want to reduce friction as much as possible. I think Apple sign-in came around that time. That makes things a lot easier on iOS, for example. You definitely want to have Google sign-in on Android. So everybody's got a Google account. They just hit the button. I know we started doing free delivery, and I wrote a really annoying banner letting people know you get free delivery. That was the biggest thing.
Yeah. I would imagine.
Yeah. So your first delivery is free. Or I think now we do 3 free deliveries. So go
Right.
use Instacart, get your free first 3 deliveries. But yeah, growth has always, so that's conversions. There's kind of two parts to growth. There's getting the users to make their first order and getting the users to continue making orders. Conversion and retention is the way I've always split those two up. And there's different levers, right? So like conversions, reduce friction, and then reduce any objections somebody might have, which
Yeah, of
is
course.
like free delivery. And with retention, one of the best retention things was actually I did it for Google Pay. We partnered with Warner Brothers. They had just come out with the Justice League movie. And what we started doing was we started showing a Justice League animation whenever you Google Pay. So it'd be like Wonder Woman flying in or a Batman. I actually have all the Justice League characters as little Android figurines for that project. And so it helps the user make like an emotional connection with the product.
Right. Makes sense.
We also use stuff like punch cards. So use Android Pay 5 times, get or Google Pay. I don't know what it's called now. I know we had a rebrand.
Right.
Use it 5 times, you get like $5 off your next purchase.
Right.
Or we had another one was like a wheel. You spin the wheel and you get some kind of prize, maybe some Google Play credits
Yeah,
or
sure.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that Justice League little promo, no money changed hands between us and Warner Brothers. We kind of both benefited, and it it made just as much of an impact as the paid
I bet.
retention
Yeah.
retention stuff. So yeah, a lot of retention on Instacart involves, I don't want to say too much, but we do have a membership program that we similar to Amazon Prime. It's
Right.
called
Makes sense.
Instacart Plus,
Yeah.
and so if we can make you a member, then you'll probably keep using it. Yeah. And that's the idea.
Yeah. Cool. And then I guess from there you went on to the shopping cart, which I would love to learn more about selfishly.
Yeah, yeah. So I work on the Caper Cart, and those are like if you've ever gone to the store and you've used self-checkout. Well, now imagine that whole self-checkout register is on the cart itself. So you scan an item, put it in the cart, scan an item, put it in the cart. And when you're ready to pay, you press a button and you pay at the
I,
cart.
I just like I hear you even starting to talk about this. And I mean, even I think last weekend I went to Costco and I usually do self checkout. And it's like so infuriating that I bring the cart up, I gotta unload every item and scan them and put them on the weigher thing, and then I have to put them all back into the cart. It's just like it could be so much more efficient. So what you're what you're talking about sounds amazing to me.
Yeah, so if someone at Costco's listening, you guys got to get Caper Carts.
So is it are you scanning it, like is there a QR scanner in the cart and you basically scan the item when you put it into the cart. Is that how it works? Or
Yeah,
are there cameras? Like how does that process work?
yeah. So I don't want to reveal too much of
No, that's fine. I mean, like
the
whatever you
secret
can
sauce,
share.
but yeah, it's
I'm just
absolutely like
p-
if you'll
personally
see
curious.
you go in
Yeah.
there, it'll beep when you put because it'll see the barcode, you put it
Got
in,
it. Okay. Yeah.
and yeah,
And then I think another thing, because again, just coming from my personal experience, when I do these self-checkout things, as I understand it, a lot of what they're trying to do is obviously to reduce theft, meaning you have to like take the item, you scan it, you put it on the scale, like it knows approximately what the item weighs. So they're trying to reduce theft that way. And again, whatever you can share, you don't have to reveal any proprietary information. But I am curious with all of these systems because I'm sure there's a big anti theft component as well. So it's like, how do you, I guess my question is, how do you balance the usability like versus all of the potential anti-theft measures?
yeah. It's actually it's a huge area because obviously, and this is something where like obviously we want as many people to use these
Of
carts as
course.
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And the retailers are they're very sensitive to theft. In the
Yep.
industry, it's called shrink.
Shrink. Got it. Okay.
Shrink.
Yep.
But ultimately, we kind of have two customers, right? So we got to sell the retailers on the cart, and then we got to sell the customers to actually
Absolutely.
use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's definitely a balance. The way I think of it is I try not to look for trade-offs. Like I know as engineers, we're always looking for trade-offs, faster, but I try to look for synergies.
Yeah.
And it's like, can we make it better for the customer and for the shopper? Can we reduce shrink and make it a smoother experience?
I, I mean, what one thing that I've wondered, and you've probably thought about this way more than me, is that for these systems, again, coming back to my Costco example,
Yeah.
why don't I just roll the entire cart onto a scale, right? And then they weigh the whole thing, and then at least I'm just trying to limit the amount of times, that I have to move things back and forth. So like
Yeah.
I can imagine with a system like yours is that if you're, in some way, however you do it, if you're able to scan all the items when they come into the cart and then I just weigh the whole cart. I mean, it seems like it seems like there might be ways, that you could balance both the usability of this system, but also make it so that you kind of know if it doesn't weigh the right amount.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the cart itself weighs the items.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's public. So I think I can, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you can imagine that you know how much each item is supposed to weigh.
Interesting.
And yeah.
Got it. So from the cart perspective, again, whatever you're willing to share, I'm assuming you run some embedded software on that device. Is that embedded Android or is that your own custom thing? Like what type of software actually runs on the
Yeah,
cart?
yeah, we're running Android on the device, so
Okay.
it's very familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I mean, I would imagine too, again, just because again, there's a lot of moving pieces here in terms of how that cart interacts, I'm assuming, with the retailer systems and all of that stuff. So kind of like your first example of the hands-free, there's a lot of moving parts here. So I would imagine that debugging these systems in the field can be difficult.
Yeah, it's my biggest biggest challenge right now because there are some advantages because we own the carts, and so we have certain access to them that you wouldn't have if it was just somebody's personal device or somebody else's device. So that is fortunate for us. But
Meaning you can push updates roughly whenever you want or at night or something along those lines.
something along those
Yeah,
lines. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Got it.
Like the retailers wouldn't like it if we just started
Yeah,
changing
of
everything.
course. Right.
But not just updates, but also what kind of data you can get on the cart is a little bit less limited if you own the cart yourself.
Sure. Of course. Yeah. But then you must also, because those systems have to interface with the retailers' payment systems, of course. So is that all like a back end connection, or kind of like the hands-free case, do you offer like an SDK that somehow gets plugged into retailer systems in some way?
Yeah, so the card itself, yeah, is not directly talking to the systems. Instead, it's a back end.
Got
It's a
it.
back
Okay.
end thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I'm not too involved in.
No, that's fine.
Like,
But I mean,
yeah,
but the cart obviously still has to have connectivity to the back end. But I would also imagine, I mean, I could be wrong, that you would still want people to do payments if there's back end connectivity issues. So it's like, do you also have to deal with offline cases and all of those edge cases as well?
yeah, yeah. So that comes up. I know when we were at the McDonald's at Google, that came up a lot because the whole store could be offline.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
user's
Right.
device could be
Yep,
offline.
absolutely.
And so we had to deal with that. And the first thing we did is we bought LTE backup for
Right.
for the McDonald's themselves. Okay,
Sure.
so that's
Yeah.
kind of like, okay, you're Google, you can throw money at the problem
Right. Yeah.
and make it work. So that was one way. Another way, we just made, like, if you go to McDonald's right now, maybe not anymore, but at the time they had AT&T DSL, and frequently they'd lose internet connectivity,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and they would just optimistically authorize your credit card. They'd have like a blacklist of credit cards that they knew they couldn't authorize. Generally, they like if your card declines later, you got a free meal. And
I
so,
I mean, we work with some restaurant customers, and even in 2025, we're told that connectivity in these stores is not awesome. So, I think there's still problems for sure.
yeah. And so the way we solved this problem was basically we added a encrypted profile of every hands-free user, compressed and small, to the device that was at the store. Our plan for scaling this, if we did get a lot of users, was basically, well, we can predict who's in what area of the
Right, and then
country, and
send a subsection of the population out to have it ready. Yeah, makes sense.
exactly, yeah. So and so then, but then if the box got compromised, you didn't want all your user profiles leaking. So then we had to
Right,
encrypt them. And the
right.
decryption key was half of it was on the box and half of it was on the user's phone itself.
Okay.
And so they could communicate offline, decrypt the key
Yeah.
that way, and then you got the full facial template, and it just the whole thing worked offline.
It's it, it's it's just so interesting to me because they're, as you said before, we're talking about it throughout this entire conversation. These systems have so many edge cases, so many failure points. I mean, to me, that's what makes it so challenging. So I
Yeah.
guess I could talk about this for an hour, and unfortunately, we're coming up on our time. I guess I just love to learn last thing on the card. What's the biggest technical challenge that you're facing right now? Trying to make it all work well.
Well, the thing does a lot. It's basically it's doing, I said it's doing weighing, it's figuring out what you're putting in there.
Right.
So it's doing a lot of real-time signal processing. And for an Android app, the hardware can't always handle it.
Right. Okay.
And so that's the biggest challenge is making it all work very efficiently, and then managing, you have we're very separated team, and so getting everybody to work together and like, hey, you guys can't use all the resources. Like other
Yeah.
people, yeah,
Are
you,
you are you owning the entire stack, meaning like all the way down to the embedded hardware and the Android OS and all of the apps? And the reason that I'm asking that is that I can imagine that for some of these systems, you probably have a system on a chip and you have some things that are doing different things and you're trying to make them coordinate. As you said, that's a lot of hardware, and some of it is real time components, and I don't know. It's like this space fascinates me.
yeah. So like me personally, I own the my scope keeps increasing, but right now it's
Yeah.
it's it's the Android apps that are on the cart. But there's other systems
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
the low level kernel stuff. Like I'm like, I haven't done that in a while. Like let's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, as I said, I could talk about this forever. I think this is a really interesting topic. Where I'd love to close out is, you've obviously been doing mobile development for a long time. You've worked across iOS and Android. I'd love to just, in our last few minutes, I'd love to pick your brain more generally around what do you think are the biggest challenges that mobile developers are facing right now? What are the biggest challenges that you face on your teams in terms of technical leadership, in terms of productivity? Would love to learn a little more about where you think the industry is going. So whatever you're willing to share there would be fantastic.
Well, I think the world has changed so much in the last year with AI. Like,
Yeah,
there's not anybody I know that's not talking about
for
AI and
sure.
how their productivity has changed. I was able to work on a personal project, and there was no way I would have gotten it done so quickly. Like, I had AI write me a Flutter app and a backend, push it to GCS, Google Cloud Services, and like I'm kind of overseeing. Like, okay, yeah, that that looks right. No, no, no. Like that's a rookie mistake. AI, fix it. And and getting the whole thing up, but it just really, I think like earlier I talked about writing 100,000 lines of code a year. Now, like anybody can do it. So the productivity seems to be increasing at a very rapid pace on like how much you can get done. You're not spending a lot of time on unit tests, but then people are coming to like new paradigms about it. So just last week I was talking to an engineer and he's like, if I can't get AI to write the code that I want to write, I start rethinking the problem space.
Mm, interesting.
Yeah, it's like he's using it as a code smell. Like it must be too complicated what I'm doing. I need to simplify. But it got me like thinking of like what are the implications of that in the long run? I'm like, well, if that's your attitude, you might avoid a certain class of problems that might be interesting, but you're probably going to get so much more done than a lot of other people. So
Yeah,
it's like,
it's a super interesting space because I think for me, I use these tools a lot. I've had
yeah,
similar experiences to you where, especially for greenfield projects, the amount of stuff that you can get done is absolutely mind blowing. My personal success, I would say, has been less on bigger, existing, like complicated code bases, where you're trying to make targeted changes and have them make sense in the whole context of the system. But I have to believe that the tools are only going to continue to improve for sure.
yeah. I find it's not too bad. Like I use cursor and I use max mode and get it
Right.
all the context window that it can get. And yeah, sometimes it goes off on its own. It's like don't don't run Gradle. It's expensive. Like wait till I okay it, and then I'll just be like, okay, run Gradle. Like
Right.
yeah, but so sometimes it has a hard time like doing what it's told, and if you give it too much info, it'll kind of go off in its own
Right.
direction. And it's prone to cargo cult programming,
Yes,
where
I agree. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, this is how it's always done. But I do think that so many of these kind of rote tasks are automated, and if you can give it a good plan, it can execute on it. And so, some days my biggest problem is I'll I'll have been working all day and will be pretty confident that I did a bunch of cool shit, but then I did so much that I can't remember everything I did that day. I'm like, wait, what? How many PRs did I have? What was that one about?
And you think that's
Did I
because
do
of the
that?
tools?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because you're not coding it yourself. You're not in the weeds as much anymore. And because you're getting so much different things done that it's just hard to keep track
Right.
of everything. Yeah. And then I feel like if you still have to code and be a little less efficient. Otherwise, I kind of find myself drifting off into a lazy land of my brain just doesn't want to work anymore. It starts forgetting how to do things. And you're like, no, no, no. Gotta keep that soft fresh
Yeah.
too.
Do
Yeah.
you do you find that there's consistency in how your teams are using these tools? Like, I guess one question that I have is I feel like there's a learning curve in terms of how to use the tools well. And I guess one one general question is like, how do you find that people are like, are they all teaching themselves, or are you like, are people converging on using the tools and the prompts in a certain way? Like, how has that been going for you?
You know, it's kind of it's kind of two things. Is one, at one point in time, I thought like, the most productive use of my time is to write the rules for the AI that are set for the project. So everybody's kind of using the same rules, keep them updated. And then I realized that it's a losing battle because the more rules that you have, the less of them get followed, the more
Interesting.
context you have,
Right.
and and the less effective they are. And so it's like, okay, let's just have some base ones. But as far as like everybody, the way I'm thinking of it right now is I could I could show someone what I'm doing today, right? And it might be useful for like a month. And then next month there's like a better way. And stuff is moving so quickly. But I think that where I see this heading is a year from now, that proficiency with AI tools, that's going to just be a job requirement. Like we don't, like when I got to Google, they didn't teach me how to program in Android. When I got to
Sure.
Instacart, they didn't
Yeah.
teach me how to program in Android or iOS. That was just a core competency that I needed to have or figure it out on my own. And so I think that's where it's headed. Being proficient with AI is going to be a core job skill that you just can't work without.
Yeah, it is amazing to me how fast some of these things are moving, and also, at least just from my own experience, I get different levels of value from them. Like it might be the code that I write. I feel like for some of the more intricate code that the AI tends to go off the rails more. But for example, as
Yeah.
you said, when I'm working on things that are more on the beaten path, whether it be SQL queries or those kinds of things, I mean, the productivity enhancements are very incredible for sure.
Yeah, like I don't know anybody that's written a regular expression in a
Oh,
long time.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
But I was
Well,
gonna say, if
yeah.
you have like an A and R to debug, then and it's not an obvious main thread blocking thing, but something else is causing A and R, like good luck.
Yeah.
Like you're
Right.
yeah.
Of course. Cool. Well, again, I would love to keep talking, but we're almost at time. Any closing thoughts that you would like to share?
Uh no, not really. Like,
All right. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much for joining. Learned a lot myself. Very interested to see where all of this stuff goes with the cart that you're working on, and I'm hoping that you can sell it to Costco. So if anyone is listening from Costco, please talk to these folks because the self checkout is very annoying. So thank you, Michael. All right, folks.
Thanks.
That's a wrap for this episode of Beyond the Noise, Signals, Stories, and Spicy Takes. Huge thanks to Michael for joining and sharing his story. And you can find this episode and all past ones on the Bitriff YouTube channel. If you had fun, drop us a review, tell your friends, or yell your favorite hot take into the void, and just make sure to tag us. I'm Matt Klein, and see you next time.